Hi there, my name is Will and I'm going to walk you through Kestra's interface and how you can get the most out of it. Now when you first boot up Kestra, you'll be presented by the wonderful dashboard, which shows you a bunch of different ratios as well as donut charts to help you get the most information about executions and flows that have happened. Now when you first boot up Kestra, you'll get this beautiful dashboard that gives you rich insight into what's going on with your workflows. As you can see here, we can see success and failure ratios, we can see executions that have happened over time, as well as ones in progress like we can see here, as well as executions that are due to happen in the future. So lots of really helpful insight here to help you out. Now you can filter this dashboard, so you can filter it by specific namespace. So here I can see specifically for my company.team namespace, as well as just for my, running. Here I can see running ones or maybe successful executions if I want to be able to see those too. I can also filter it by time. So here I could say I only want to see things that have happened in the last, 2 weeks. And I can also filter whether I want this to be user workflows or system workflows. So if you don't know what those are, check out the video here that will explain all about system flows and how you can use those to help maintain your Kestra instance. On top of that, we can also refresh the dashboard here to be able to get more information for running flows. At the top here, we have a search box, and this is useful for being able to search between different pages. So here I can, easily type in flows and then easily navigate to the flows page. On top of that, we can see notifications such as brand new updates to Kestra, so you can find out what's new and how you can get started with it inside of the latest version, as well as a help guide to help you with figuring out how to get started. And if you haven't already, I definitely recommend using the guided tour. On our left-hand side here, we have all of the main menus of Kestra, including where we can see all of our workflows, the executions related to those, logs produced, all of our namespaces, blueprint examples to help us get started, plugins that we can use to build powerful workflows, documentation that will show you docs related to the version of Kestra that you are using, as well as an administration portal that will give you some useful information for your Kestra instance. On top of that, there's a settings menu too, where you can configure things like the color, language, and the time. You'll also notice in the top right-hand corner, we have a create button. Now this will let you jump straight into creating a workflow. And so as you can see here, I'm straight into a new workflow example. I can just put my flow ID, and when I press save, it's gonna jump me straight into the editor for this flow, where I can now execute this and see it happen in real time. Moving on from the dashboard, the next tab we have on the left hand side is flows, and in here is where we'll be able to see all of the flows inside of our Kestra instance. Now to begin with, at the top here, you're going to get this beautiful graph that's going to show you all the information about executions happening in your Kestra instance. Now again, you can filter this by namespace. So here I'm going to filter this by overview video, and here I can see that I haven't had any executions in the last month for this namespace, but I can see the workflows related to the namespace in here as well. I can change this again to company.team, and here I can see execution status, when it was last executed, labels associated, triggers, and so on. And I can see all of these by scrolling down. Now I can continue to use the filters up here as well, where I can easily filter by user and system flows, as well as labels too. I can also toggle the chart on and off if I would want to do so. Now, if I want to look for a specific workflow, I can use the search box here. So I can type in Golang here, and we can see that it just comes up immediately. So really useful if you've got a lot of different workflows and it's difficult to find them. You can also create filters here as well. So if I wanted to create a filter that does company.team as well as Golang, I can call this filter Go, and I can press save. So now when I first open the flows page, I can press filters, select it, and as you can see, it's put the namespace and the search to match that filter. So really useful if you want to be able to access specific requirements really quickly. Now, when you go down to the execution page, you'll be able to see on the right here which ones are executed using triggers, and I can also click on details here to be able to open that flow up in its own page. Now, at the top again, we'll see an import button here. So if you've got any workflows workflows downloaded as YAML files, you can import those directly into Kestra here. So quite useful because in the settings menu, there is an export all flows button, so you can import them quite easily using this button up here. Now, if I click on one of these workflows, such as Divi trip data, here it's going to give me again another dashboard, but this is specifically for this workflow. So here I can have a look down and see any descriptions for this workflow, the next scheduled executions, when it was last executed, and so on. And as I can see here, not much has happened. But if I was to change this to maybe a couple of years ago and then change the other one to like today, the 8th of October, I can press OK there, and I can see when it has executed in the past and when it was successful and failed. I can also visualize what this looks like by going to the topology view. This is going to show me all the different tasks and how they relate to each other. In this example here, this has a schedule trigger. So I can see here, it has that enabled here, and I can see the next execution is going to happen on the 10th of October. And then if I go to the topology view, I can see that trigger is set up here quite separately to the task. So it makes it really easy to visualize what's going on. When I go to the executions page, I can see every single run of that workflow and the status related to it. So I can see here that this has been successful every day that it has run, and I can see that today it has run successfully as well. And then I can click on the execution ID to be able to go straight into that execution to see more information about that run. So here I can go to the Gantt chart and easily see how long each task took, as well as log messages. I can dive into those logs a little bit more using the log view as well. I can also see how long each task took in a topology view, as well as any outputs generated. So here I can see that this did not produce any outputs and no metrics, but useful if you want to see that too. And in the Enterprise Edition, you can view audit logs, so you can see who executed the workflow and any other things changed there too. Now, in the overview page of that execution, you can easily view here all of the information for that workflow. So I can see which namespace it's in, how many revisions it's had, and which revision was actually executed, any labels associated, and I can scroll down and see any variables and triggers too. And this works as well for inputs and outputs. In the execution page, I can actually set labels for the execution. So if there's an error with this or it's got a related thing, I can actually set an execution label after it's happened to help me be able to find those later. And this is just a simple key value pair. So here I can add the label status bug, so I can then filter for that later. I can also change the status. So if for some reason I need to change the status to failed because even though it was successful, it didn't do the thing I wanted it to, I can do that too to make it easier for me to find later. You can also use replay to be able to replay this execution. Now this will replay the execution rather than create a new one, and you can change which revision it's going to use too. I totally recommend checking out our replay video to learn a bit more about how that works. Back into the flow itself, we can go to the editor next, and this is where all the magic happens. This is where we create our workflows. So in here, I've got my YAML on the left, which is how we define the workflow, and on the right, I have the topology view. But I can use the buttons in the top right here to change this view, so I can change it to be just the source or the documentation. And the lovely thing about the documentation is when I click on different tasks or triggers, it will then show me the documentation for that specific type. So here I'm using the commands plugin, and I can see exactly the documentation for that type here. Makes it really, really intuitive. And as soon as I click on trigger, I can see the schedule trigger comes up as well. So really, really helpful for being able to build your workflows without having to jump between a bunch of different tabs. Next up, we have the source and topology view. So here I can see that same topology view, but I can see it side by side with my workflow. So if I was to create another Python task underneath, like so, and then save it, I can see that that Python task immediately comes up inside of the topology view to help me understand at which order they run in. And I can easily swap the order here like so. And we can see again, it swaps order just like that. Now, on top of that, you can also see blueprints to the side. So maybe you're building a workflow and you're struggling to figure out how to do it. I can easily filter here, for example, via Python. And in here, I can now get a bunch of Python examples that I can easily click in and get some inspiration. And I go, yeah, actually, this is exactly what I want. Or I could copy just the task, or maybe I could copy the whole workflow if I want to use it. So really useful for being able to get some full examples to use in your workflows. On top of that, on the right-hand side here, we can delete the workflow, copy it. We can also add triggers here as well using the user interface. And as you can see here, I can easily select different task types type. So here I might want to select another schedule trigger. I can easily type in the ID. So I can say schedule 2. I can define that cron expression. And as you can see here, it's got loads of useful pop-ups that tell you what you need to fill into those boxes, which ones are required, and the data types you need to use for them. So it makes it really easy to be able to build your workflows without having to write any code. And when you save this, it will automatically add the YAML too. So here you can see that I've just typed in the cron expression. Now when I press save, you can see it's automatically added it to the YAML, so I can easily configure it. And if I go back to that topology view, I can easily see that I have 2 schedules now when I press save, and I can easily edit those from the user interface as well as add other things too. So if I want to add another task, I can do that here too, and I can type in maybe Slack incoming webhook, and I can then add in all the information for that too, and that will appear here as well. And again, you can press just the topology button. So if you want to only edit in the low-code editor, you can do that too. You do not have to write code to be able to use Kestra, which is one of the beauties about the product. On top of that, under the action menu, you can also add a global error handler. So here, this goes under an error block. So here I can easily have a log message that's called error, and I can say in that message, when I type it here, I can say it's a string, and I can just type in my error message here. When I press save and save again, I can now see it's got a separate error block here, which if I go to the source and topology view, you can see it's added it underneath my trigger here, making it really easy to have your errors, your triggers, and your tasks work completely either in YAML or in the UI. And if you want to add any edit any metadata, you can do that too, such as adding descriptions, labels, inputs, outputs, variables, and retries. You can do that here too. But it is worth noting that all of that can be done in the YAML editor too, so you've got the best of both worlds. Moving on to the next tab here, we have revisions. Now, every single time I press save, a new revision is created. And you can think of that like pushing to GitHub. So here I can easily see side by side the first ever revision of my workflow, and I can easily see different ones. And this is really nice because I can then easily roll back to an older version, as well as, replay as well. So as I mentioned earlier, I can go to an execution and I can actually replay this using the most up-to-date version of our workflow. So I don't have to necessarily rerun all the tasks. It will just rerun the new bits in there. Really, really handy. I can also view this line by line too if I would prefer to do that. Next up, we have triggers, and this shows me the overview of the triggers happening. For example, when they're next going to execute, where I can manage backfills, as well as being able to just simply disable them too. So really, really handy if you want to be able to prevent them from running without having to go and edit your YAML. On top of that, I can get a really nice overview here of logs that happen between different executions. So we can see all of these are from different executions, but I can see that they have produced the same output. Same for the metrics produced here too. Now this task doesn't produce any metrics, but this is really helpful being able to see a summary for all executions. So next up is the dependencies tab. Now I've got a different example here that shows how different workflows might relate to each other. So here I have a workflow here that is going to get triggered when the other one is triggered first. So here I've got a workflow that's going to get triggered from a different one. So here, just a simple hello world example, but if I go to dependencies, I can see that this separate workflow is going to in fact trigger it using this flow trigger. So really helpful for being able to help you visualize how it works on the bigger scale. So as you can see in the concurrency tab, I can easily see that we've got multiple different executions, which ones are queued, and how many and what the availability is for this. So it makes it really easy to understand what status all these executions are without having to dig into the details. And then lastly, we have audit logs again for being able to monitor multiple different users on the Enterprise Edition. Next up, we have the executions page. Now we kind of brushed upon this a little bit by showing some of the executions from our previous flows, but this gives us a whole overview of what's going on, including all of those previous filters that we've seen before, like the namespaces, statuses, as well as being able to filter the time. Now this is really helpful because it just makes it that little bit easier to see what's going on between all your workflows, and this graph that makes it really easy. Now I mentioned earlier about setting up a label. We can easily see that here. If I do that, we can see the label that we configured earlier, and this makes it really easy to be able to find those easily. I can also set this to refresh automatically every 10 seconds, so I can just leave this open in the background and keep an eye on things, and it will refresh the page for me automatically. Now, if I want to execute a workflow from this page, I can press the execute button in the top right, select a namespace of my choice, such as I'm going to select concurrency, and then I can easily select the concurrency limited flow example. I can specify any inputs if they're needed, and then I can press execute. So I can do that without even having to find the workflow in the first place. And as I can see here, it's executing my flow as expected. Next, we have the logs page. Again, very similar to the executions, but this shows us all the logs produced between all of our executions. So here I can see all of those execution IDs next to one another, and I can easily see if things are failing and when they're not. So really helpful. And again, you can filter all of that like we've had previously. Next up is the namespaces page. Now, this is really helpful for being able to just monitor everything going on in your specific namespace at once. Now here I can easily see a nice graphic for whether namespaces are sub namespaces to one another, or if they are completely separate. So here I can see company is a parent namespace, but it has my team and team as child namespaces. On top of that, I can easily filter and expand them like so, and I can open them by clicking on the little button on the right hand side. On top of that, we have the system namespace at the top. This is a really good namespace for being able to have all the flows that manage your Kestra instance. So we've got some blueprints here that help you understand that. For example, setting up alerts for failed workflows, or maybe creating tickets when things fail, or just keeping things up to date using a Git push flows and sync flows plugin to just keep things up to date with your Git repositories. But you could also use that with like a Git sync flows plugin, which means that you can have namespace files automatically sync to your Kestra instance without having to make sure that you've got the up-to-date version. Now, inside of the namespace, when we click into it, we get an overview, just like we got on the home screen dashboard, but this is just for the namespace. So I can easily see everything related to this namespace in one place. Next, the key thing here is the editor. Now, this is for editing our namespace files. Now, in the workflows, you can easily edit these by pressing the files option at the top corner, but you can now just go in here to see namespace files for anything in here. So all of these files here might not be related to specific workflows, but if I want to be able to just come in here and check what files are in the namespace, I can do that here. Here I've got all of my workflows. This is very similar to filtering on the flows page, but I can see it all here within the namespace. Same for executions as well. Now here I have dependencies. Now this shows me how all of my workflows in that namespace relate to one another. Now in this scenario, we're not seeing a huge amount of action, but in this next example, you will. So here you can see I've got a bunch of different flow triggers that relate to one another. So I can easily see that here in the dependencies view. And then lastly, we have the key value store. Now the key value store is great because it lets you easily set a bunch of key values that you can then use in your workflows, allowing you to create stateful workflows. If you want to learn a little bit more about how to use the key value store, check out the video here. We have a bunch of other options as well on the Enterprise Edition, including being able to edit some of the information about your namespace once it's been created, adding variables at the namespace level, as well as plugin defaults, which means you can easily set up configurations for multiple workflows in the namespace. We can also manage secrets directly from the user interface, so you don't have to do it inside of your Docker configuration, as well as see audit logs for all of the activity happening here, such as creating workflows, execution statuses, and all of that. Next up, we have the blueprints page. Now, this is really helpful for being able to get started building workflows with ready to go examples. And I can easily filter those with a bunch of the different categories here, as well as search for them. So I can easily search for Python, and I will see a bunch of Python related workflows at the top. And I can easily use these by pressing the use button that will just create a complete new workflow for me, and I'm ready to get started. Or I can easily click onto one of these workflows, such as this one, get an easy interactive topology view to understand how it works, have a little read, and some of them have a description too to help you understand how it works. Next up, we have the plugins page. So if you're trying to build a new workflow, but you're not really sure what integrations there are, you can check out the over 500 plugins we have available here to understand how that will work. I can easily see here, for example, that S3 is supported, and when I click onto that, it will then show me all of the different tasks related to S3, and I can see all of their properties too. too. So really helpful for being able to understand if there is the right plugin for the job that you're after. Next, we have the documentation. Now, this is the same documentation that you'll find at kestra.io/docs. Now, the key thing here is that this will match the version of Kestra you're using. So if you're still using an older version of Kestra, the documentation will match that so that you won't have any new things that will break in your version. So really helpful if you're, unable to upgrade due to a dependency that means you need to use an older version, but then it doesn't mean you lose the access to the docs as well. And here we can easily find things by opening the menus, and I can then click on here and read about how to build a custom plugin in Kestra really easily. Lastly, we have administration. So here is where you would configure a lot of the things for the enterprise edition, such as users and roles. You can view all of your audit logs, manage your cluster and tenants. Here I'm able to view my triggers, so I can easily see here which triggers are due to run, which ones are turned on and off, and get a good overview of that. And again, I can filter that so I can see ones for just specific namespaces. And then lastly, we've also got stats, so I can see exactly how many workflows, namespaces, tasks, triggers, and executions, and how long I've had my executions running as well, which is really, really helpful. So gives me a really good insight here too. And then lastly, in the settings menu, just a few things here you can use to help configure your instance. So I can set the light or dark theme, so I can set it to light or dark. I can automatically change the language, and we now support a ton of languages too, so there's something for everyone involved. I can select the time zone, but beware, this is the time zone of how things will view it in Kestra. By default, Kestra still uses UTC on the back end, so if you want to change that, you'll need to do that in your configuration, as well as the date format if I have a preference there too. And at the bottom here, I can export all of my flows. Hopefully you found that useful, and you now know how to get the most out of Kestra with all of its different interfaces. Let us know in the comments below what part of Kestra is your favorite and which part of the UI you use every day. And don't forget to join our Slack community where you can discuss with us further.